Okay, so here's the background of Michael. He's a United States Academy graduate. He works today, at the Boeing Apache plant, where he does work as a system engineer. But like I said earlier, he used to be an air traffic controller or a airborne intercept controller on the AWACS E3 aircraft that you can see the picture there. So I guess what he was going to present today was about the different generations of helicopters and the different metrics that are used to compare different generations. Again, I'm not very familiar with the topic, not the topic, but the research that he did to be able to put his paper together, but I will try my best here. So here's some of the analysis that he did there. He basically compared different generations of helicopters, but obviously you have things that when you're trying to compare stuff, it's very hard to do. You have to be careful that you compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges. So you got to be careful not to be too broad in your comparison. You also have to be careful about missing key parameters or metrics when you compare one generation to another. And of course, typically in the media, in the trade media, you hear a lot about aircraft generations. Like right now we are flying a 5th generation fighter, the F-22 and the F-35, but you hardly hear information about helicopter generation. And I think that's what he wanted to cover on his presentation. So let's see, okay. So this is his way of looking at aircraft generations. He looks at the pace of development. He looks at key technologies that drive each generation. For example, on the 5th generation fighters, the F-22 brings the topic of stealth, and that is one key technology that drives a particular generation. He also looked at comparison of combat capability between generations. For example, comparing the Phantom, the F-4 Phantom, to the F-22, you definitely have to realize that these are two different capabilities, even though the aircraft look very similar in many ways. And what are the things that the generations are improving or likely to be improved on for the future? Those are the metrics that you use to define a particular aircraft or helicopter generation. Okay, he talks about how the missions of fighter generations, for example, like I was talking earlier, what are the fighter generation key points that translate into a helicopter generation definition? And I think that's something that he did. And of course, fighter aircraft generation has the advantage that analysis on those aircraft have been done for many, many years. And there's a lot of literature when it comes to aircraft or fighter aircraft generation. The helicopters are a little bit of a disadvantage when it comes to that. Okay, there's a list of fighter generations there. Obviously, we are in some kind of a 5th generation when it comes to fighters. So basically, he has a very nice list here broken down for fighters. And as you can see, my guess is that we are now on the 5th generation of fighters. And most people will probably agree with that it is, that's where we are today. The 6th generation, which is now under development. In fact, we heard in the news recently that the Air Force has flown a fighter. Nobody has seen it. Nobody has seen pictures of it. Nobody has seen, what are the capabilities of the aircraft. So maybe we can call that aircraft a 6th generation fighter. We don't know that yet, obviously. So there's a lot to look into that. Okay, so here are some pictures that will illustrate what Michael was trying to project on the fighter generations. You started out with the Banshee aircraft. Here it is. And obviously the F-36 and the a Phantom, which was a very well-rounded fighter for all kinds of mission. And the Phantom basically broke ground in that respect, that it was not only an aircraft that a new generation paradigm shift, it was also an aircraft that was able to do ground attack missions, fighter mission, bomber missions, everything in one package. And that obviously broke ground for the next generations that came after, like the F-15, the F-18, and the F-22. So, and these are the matrix that the people that deal with fighter generational characteristics deal with. You know, these are the matrix that they use. You know, what kind of beyond visual range capability they have. What are the avionics? How many aircraft were built? Did it improve the maneuverability or the handling qualities of the aircraft to a great extent? For example, when you use engine vectoring, nozzle vectorings on the back of the aircraft, that is obvious an advantage for maneuverability, and that is also a shift in the matrix, right? That's a very important matrix. Let's see, what are the threats? What are the countermeasures that the enemy uses against that particular fifth generation capability? For example, the F-22 aircraft, when it flies in a stealth mode, obviously flying around in stealth mode with everything turned off, just relying on the stealth of the airframe, there's some radars up there that have been talked about in the trade media that are able to detect a stealth technology. I don't have any proof of that. I don't have data that proves that, but there's a lot of talk about that in the media, in the trade media. Does Russia and China have that capability? We do not know, but those are things that could be driving some of the generational definitions on aircraft. So how do you compare fighter to attack helicopters? Let's see. Okay, so he talks about the fact that a helicopter has a very short history compared to fighter aircraft. Well, I don't know if I agree with that, but the bottom line is that fighter aircraft have acquired more attention when it comes to helicopter. That is probably true. Let's see. When a fighter is built, it has a particular airframe capability and airframe mission. Helicopters, on the other hand, are designed to do all kinds of work, all kinds of missions. That is also makes it difficult to compare an aircraft generation versus a helicopter generation. There are many more fighter aircraft types being built than helicopter types. I don't know if I agree with that, but yes, there's obviously a plethora of fighters compared to helicopters. Yeah, the fighter sensors can look very far away as compared to a helicopter. A helicopter relies on the eyesight of the pilot to be able to perform the mission that they need to perform, not only when attacking a target on the ground, but also when navigating, when looking for other enemy aircraft and whatever. One exception, perhaps, is the seeking AEW, or airborne radar, AWACS, on a helicopter. During the Falklands War, this seeking helicopter was converted to carry a foldable radar that you could lower and detect aircraft probably close to 100 miles to 200 miles around the ship or the aircraft, the British aircraft carrier. So that's probably one of the exceptions on helicopters that have very long beyond visual range capability. That particular helicopter had it, but that's a very unique aircraft, a very unique fix that they did because they had to in order to operate down there in the South Atlantic. So that's all probably a blip on the history of helicopter beyond visual capability. When you're comparing three different aircraft or three different helicopters, the weapon envelope can vary between different aircraft, obviously. The same for the helicopter. The helicopter could be a simple utility type versus a very sophisticated attack helicopter like the Apache and the Cobra. So yes, there are very different capabilities between airframes. let's see, metrics that matter for attack helicopters. Um, Airframe, whether it's a utility type versus a attack type, I mentioned that earlier. What kind of targeting sensors they have, what kind of weapons they have, how can it survive, what are the sensors to be able to survive. Can it fly can it only fly out during the daytime, or does it have the capability to fly at night? What kind of mission system it has? Are they highly integrated? Are they only federated? So there's a lot to look at when it comes to matrix on attack helicopters. He broke down the different generations of helicopter, at least he tried to. And this is the first time I see this type of chart in any paper or any presentation, by the way. Because like I was talking about earlier, and again, I'm speaking for the author, it's very complex to break this stuff down. And the aircraft industry, the fixed wing aircraft industry, has had the time to do that over so many years, not so for the helicopter community. So it's a little bit more difficult for the helicopter community. And he's trying, obviously, to attempt to do that in this particular presentation. And again, I would recommend you that you read this chart on the paper that he wrote. Here pictures of the generations that he's talking about, starting out with the Huey. Then, because the Huey was a ground attack helicopter during the Vietnam War, and so it was basically for a while it was doing what the Cobra did at one point, and again the 1F, which is this one right here, and the Apache improvements later, and the Apache improvement later on, even with the Echo. He calls that a Generation 5 helicopter. And probably the Cobra and the Huey Cobra also, and the Zulu and the Yankee are probably equivalent helicopters to the Apache also in that generation. So in summary, fighter aircraft generation is analytical in many ways, because there's such a great amount of data that is available to the person doing the comparison or the characterization of the particular generation. They are key matrix for attack helicopters. They are very well defined, and that's probably the one that we can concentrate on when it comes to trying to define a generational capability. Notice that we haven't talked about cargo helicopter capabilities or anti-submarine helicopter generational definitions. Those are different matrix, I guess. Let's see. Notice that he says that he advocates for attack helicopter generation definitions, and he would like to separate that from other rotorcraft development generations or definitions. So with that, I would like to close my presentation. For the author, Michael Leong, I give him total credit for it, because all I'm doing is basically presenting the slides. So what we're going to do now, we got about a few minutes for a question and answers. Let me bring up my screen for questions to see if I have any questions on this particular presentation here. Hold on for a sec. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I got some feedback here saying that that Mike was not able to log on the forum site for whatever reason, but that's okay. I think the paper that he wrote is fairly detailed. If I miss something on the presentation itself, you will be able to read it on his paper. You can also contact him in case you have any questions about a particular slide or something that I'd said or anything like that.
Erasmo?
Yes, who's speaking, please?
Dan Schrage. Can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the one thing he's really missing
It's 12
is
o'clock.
maneuverability, agility in low speed, and also in air-to-air combat. Back in the 1970s, helicopters and fighters were flown against each other at Nellis Air Force Base. I happened to witness that. And the kill ratio for the helicopters was 5-1 compared to the fighters. I mentioned somewhere at the beginning about maneuverability and agility, but basically, that's a very important part that he doesn't address. Most of his generations are tied either to increase in mission equipment or maybe to some changes in weapon systems. But if you look at what he said, he was important. Maneuverability and agility is very important. And that's why I pointed out for Comanche, it has to have air-to-air capability, not just passive using a Stinger, because the environment it's going to be all kinds of different types of aircraft that you got to encounter.
That is correct, sir. And the Chinese and the Russians have not missed that point. They have developed their own tactics when it comes to helicopter fighter tactics. And obviously, I'm 60 years old, so I was able to witness a lot of that conversations in the trade media at the time, Aviation Week, Flight Magazine, and all those very famous trade magazines. They talked a lot for a period of time there, and I'm glad you were a witness to that. And for a period of time, that was the in thing, to talk about how would a helicopter get into combat with a Hind Russian helicopter, for example. How would a helicopter fight a frogfoot attack helicopter, which is a Russian equivalent to the A-10 Warthog? So yes, that conversation was going on at the time, and it should be still going on. I'm afraid that you're correct, that going forward, helicopters will have to deal with all kinds of threat, airborne, ground, you name it, laser, electronic warfare. Helicopters continue to be very vulnerable when they're flying close to the ground, no question about it. So thank you for that comment. I really appreciate it. Anybody else? I got a question from somebody, Mr. Y. It says, in the ground attack, is the ground attack the main mission of helicopter compared to fighters? I would say yes, definitely a helicopter, because it's flying so close to the ground. The pilots have a lot of visibility to the target. They can see the target, and they can wear night equipment to see the target. When they have a laser, they have a dedicated person in the front cockpit that the main job of that person is to find the people on the ground, to target that threat, and to help the pilot eliminate that threat. So yes, when it comes to military helicopters, a lot of effort, a lot of money, and a lot of machines are used to do attack on the ground. However, having said that, the transport area is a big part of helicopter design, especially military helicopter design. Look at the Chinook, and the CH-53, Sikorsky CH-53, and even the Huey in many ways are cargo aircraft. They do carry a lot of external load. They do carry a lot of people. And of course, the B-22, which is a half airplane, half helicopter, also does the same thing. They do a lot of the transportation for the Army and the Navy and the Marines. So I cannot really say that the main purpose of helicopters is to ground attack, but there is definitely a big part of it. So thank you for that question.